Stubby Pringle Christmas. High on the mountainside, by the little lined cabin in the crisp, clean dusk of evening, Stubby Pringle swings into saddle. He has the shape of a bear in the dimness, bundled thick against the cold. Double socks crowd scarred boots. Leather chaps cover patched corduroy pants. Fleece-lined jacket with wear of winters on bulges body, and heavy gloves, blunt fingers. 2 red bandanas folded together, fatten under throat. Battered hat is pulled down to sit on ears. Stubby Pringle looks out over the worlds of snow and ice and tree and rock. He stretches tall and hats brushes the stars in the sky. He is Stubby Pringle, cowhand of the Triple X, and this is his night to howl. He's heading for the Christmas dance at the schoolhouse in the valley. His horse is a flop-eared, ewe-necked, cat-hipped strawberry roan that looks like it should have died weeks ago, but has iron rods for bones and nitroglycerin for blood and can go from here to doomsday. It knows that 27 miles of hard winter going are foreordained for this evening, and 27 more of harder uphill return by morning. Stubby Pringle sits in his saddle and he grins into the cold and distance and future full of festivities. Those are careless, haphazard, scrambled feature under that low hat brim. Not much fuzz yet on his chin. Why shucks, is he just a boy? Don't make that mistake. Though his 20th birthday is still 6 weeks away. Stubby's been taking care of himself since he was orphaned at 13. Stubby's been doing man's work since he was 15. He slaps the right saddlebag. It contains a 2-pound box of fancy chocolates. He slaps the left saddlebag. It holds a paper parcel that contains a piece of dress goods. Interesting items, yes. Ammunition for the campaign he has in mind to soften the affections of whichever female of the right vintage among those at the schoolhouse appeals to him most. Stubby Pringle is just another of the far scattered, poorly paid, patch-clothes cowhands that inhabit these parts. He knows that. But this is his night to howl. He is Stubby Pringle, true begotten son of the wildest stallion, and he's been riding line through winter storms for 2 months. No break. And this is his night to stomp floorboards till the schoolhouse shakes. This is his night to whirl a willing female till she's dizzy enough to see past the patched clothes to the man inside. "You're a dang-blatted young fool," says old Jake Hanlon from the cabin doorway, "riding out on a night like tonight. If'n it is Christmas Eve," he says. "But if I was your age, I reckon I'd be doing it too. Whirl one of 'em for me." Stubby Pringle lifts the reins and roans sigh and lifts his feet. At easy amble, they drop over the edge of the benchland and on down to the great bleak of expansive mountainside. "Wahoo!" he yells. "Skip to Maloo!" he shouts. "Do-si-do and round about!" Far ahead, over the top of the last and lowest ridge on into the valley, he sees tiny specks of glowing allure that are schoolhouse windows. "Wahoo!" he yells. "Come on, women, girls!" he shouts. "Come on a skipping. I'm a-comin'." He slaps the spurs to roan. He leaps like a mountain lion full into the hard gallop down the slope through the reckless crusted drifts of ice-coated branches. He is Stubby Pringle, born with spurs on, nursed on tarantula juice, weaned on rawhide, at home in the saddle of a hurricane, in the shape of horse that can race to the edge of eternity and back. He is 10 feet tall, and the horse is gigantic, with wings soaring in 40-foot leaps down the flank of the white wonder of winter world. They slow at the bottom. They stop. They look up at the rise of the last low ridge ahead. "Hold it, Stubby. What is that?" Off to the right, he listens. Sound of axe chopping wood. "Now what kind of dong-bonging, ding-busted, dang-bladed fool be chopping wood on Christmas Eve? What kind of chopping is that anyway? Uneven in rhythm, feeble in stroke." He pulls the roan down to the right. He is Stubby Pringle, born to the tune of blatting calves, branded at birth, cowman raised and cowman to the marrow, and no cowman, no true cowman rides on without stopping to check anything strange on the range. The lantern light shone through the small oil paper window. Ah, yes, of course. It's the Henderson place, homesteaders. betting the government that they can stave off starving for 5 years in exchange for 160 acres of land. Land that just might be able to support all 4 steers to one section. Homesteaders. Always out of almost everything. Money and food and tools and smiles and joy of living. Everything. Except maybe hope and stubborn endurance. Stubby Pringle sees a woman. Her face is gray and pinched and tired. A ragged man's jacket bumps along her woolsey dress and clogs the arm as she tries to swing the axe into a good-sized branch on the ground. Axe bounces and barely misses her ankle. He swings in the wrong close. "Ma'am," he says. "You trying to cripple yourself?" She just stares at him. Where's your man? This is man's work." "He's sick," she says. "Doc thinks he'll be all right, only he's mighty weak." Stubby Pringle looks off at the last low ridge top, hides the valley and the schoolhouse. "Well, likely they ain't much more than got started," he says. "I'll just chop you a bit of wood." He is Stubby Pringle, moonstruck maverick of the Triple X, born with axe in hand, with strength of stroke and muscles, weaned on whetstone, fed on cordwood, raised to fell whole forests. He is 10 feet tall, and his axe is enormous in the moonlight, and chips fly like flakes of snow. He leans axe against the stump, and he scoops up whole cords at a time. He strides to the bark-slack shack and kicks open the door. Both corners of the front room by the fireplace are now piled full. Wood enough for a whole wicked winter week. Stubby looks around. Man lies on a big old bed, blanket over face, gray, pale, snoring, long in snow. Stubby steps into the doorway to the back room. Faint in the dimness inside, he sees one bunk. Under an old quilt, a curly-headed small girl, and in another, a boy who'd be waist-high, awake and standing. He turns back. "I got to be going," he says. He starts toward the door. He stops. Something is missing. "Where's your tree, ma'am?" he says. "Kid's got to have a Christmas tree." He sees the woman sink down into the chair. He hears a sigh come from her. "I ain't had time to cut one," she says. "Man's job anyway," Stubby says. "I'll get it for you. Then I gotta be going." He scoops up the axe and strides off. He is Stubby Pringles, born an expert on Christmas trees, nursed on pine needles, weaned on pine cones, raised with an eye for size and shape and symmetry. There, a beauty. Axe blade slices clean and swift. He strides back with tree on shoulder. Stubby Pringle sets it up, center of the front room, and it stands perky and proud. "There you are, ma'am," he says. "Just get your things out and start decorating. I gotta be going." He stops in the doorway. He hears the sigh behind him. "We got no things," she says. Stubby Pringle looks off at the last low ridgetop, hiding the valley and the schoolhouse. "Reckon I still got a bit of time," he says. "They'll be whooping it mighty late." He sheds the hat and the gloves and the bandanas and jackets. He asks for things, and the woman jumps to get those few of them she has. He tells her what to do, and she does, and he does plenty himself. With this and with that, magic wonders arrive. He is Stubby Pringle, born to poverty and hard work, weaned on nothing, fed on less, raised to make do with least possible and make the most of it. Pinto beans strung on thread brighten tree in the firelight. Strips of one bandana bobbing the bows of branch ends like red flowers. Snippets of fleece from the jack lining sprinkled over the tree like fresh fallen snow. "Well, all you got to do now is get what you got for the kids and put it under, but I really got to be going." He stops in the doorway. He hears the sigh behind him. Somehow he knows without turning around that 2 tears are sliding down the thin pinched cheeks. "You go along," she says. "They're good young'uns. They know how it is, and they ain't expecting anything." Stubby Pringle stands in the open doorway, looking out at the last ridgetop that hides the valley and the schoolhouse. "I reckon I got a bit more time. Likely they'll be sashaying up till most morning." Stubby Pringle strides on out, leaving open the door. He strides back, closing the door with his heel behind him, and in one hand he has a paper parcel. In the other hand he has a chunk of good pine wood. He tosses the parcel to the woman's lap, Now there's makings for a right cute dress for the girl. Needle and threader like you can whip it up in no time. I'll just whittle me out a little something for the boy. Woman sits in the rocking chair sewing. Her fingers fly. Stitch, stitch, stitch. A dress shapes under her hands. Small and flounced with little puff sleeves. A fine dress for smiles and joy of living. On a stool nearby sits Stubby Pringle. Piece of good pine wood in his hand, knife in the other. Splendid 7-bladed knife he always has with him. He is Stubby Pringle. Born with a feel for knives in hand, weaned on emery wheel, fed on shavings, raised to whittle his way through the world. There in his hands something is shaping. A horse, yes. A flop-eared head is high on his ewe neck, stretched out, sniffing in the wind, snorting into the distance. It is a horse fit to carry a waist-high boy to the edge of eternity and back. He closes his knife and puts it in his pocket. He looks up. Dress is finished in the woman's lap. She sits, slumped, deep in a rocking chair, and she too snores steady. Stubby Pringle takes the dress and puts it under the tree. He sets the wooden horse beside it. Quietly he strides back and then back, out and then back. He carries the box of fancy chocolates. Gently he lays it on the lap of the woman. He stands by the big old bed and looks down at the snoring man. Ain't fair to forget him, he says. He takes out the 7-bladed knife from his pocket and lays it on the blanket on the bed. Swift as sliding moon shadow, he is gone. High up the frosty clouds scuttle across the face of the moon. Wind whips through the topmost tips of the tall pines. Firm in the saddle is Stubby Pringle, out on the prowl, ready to howl, heading for the dance at the schoolhouse. He is 10 feet tall, and the roan is gigantic. Hold it, Stubby. Do you see what's happening out there in the valley? Tiny lights that are schoolhouse windows are winking out. Tiny dark shapes are wagons pulling away. The moon is dropping down in the sky. What is that, moving slow and lonesome up the snow-covered mountainside? It is a flop-eared, ewe-necked, cat-hipped roan. Just that. Nothing more. Small cow pony, worn and weary. Slumped in saddle is Stubby Pringle. Head down, shoulders sagged. He's just another of the far-scattered, poorly paid, patch-clothed cowhands who inhabit these parts. Just that. And something more. He is the biggest thing that there is in the whole wide roster of the human race. He is a man who has given of himself, of what little he has and is, to bring smiles and joy of living to others along the way. He jogs along, thinking of none of this. He is thinking of dances undanced and floorboards unstomped, of willing women left unwhirled. Half asleep in the saddle, he is thinking now of bygone Christmas seasons, and of a boy born to poverty pouring in the flicker of firelight over the ragged Christmas picture book. And suddenly he hears something. The tinkle of sleigh bells. Sleigh bells? Yes, I'm telling it to you straight. And suddenly he sees something. Antlered heads high, frosty breath streaming, bodies rushing, swift and silent, seeming to leap into the air alone, needing no touch of the ground beneath. Reindeer? Yes. Reindeer swooping down and leaping past and rising again, and with them, hard on their heels, almost lost in the swirling snow mist of their passing, something big and bulky, with runners like sleigh and flash of white beard whipping and white and crack of long whip snapping. Out of the dark of night, mingled with the moan of wind, comes a long-drawn chuckle, jolly and cheery and full of smiles and joy in living, and with it the long-drawn-out words, "Well done, pardner." Stubby Pringle shakes his head. "And I didn't have a single drink tonight," he says. But he is a cowman through and through to the marrow. He can't ride on without stopping to check anything strange on this range. He swings down. He fumbles in his jacket pocket and finds a match. He strikes it. Unmistakable. Reindeer tracks. Stubby Pringle stretches up tall. Stubby Pringle swings into saddle. Roan needs no slap of spurs to unleash strength and upward surge to up steep mountainside. It knows. There in the saddle once more is Stubby Pringle, the moonstruck maverick of the Triple X, hard-proved, hard-honed cowhand, 10 feet tall, needing horse gigantic, with wings, iron-boned and dynamite fuel to take him home, to the little line cabin for some few winks of sleep before another day's hard work. Stubby Pringle slips into the cold, clammy bunk. "Well, was it worth all that riding?" comes the voice of old Jake Hanlon from the other bunk. "Why, sure," says Stubby. "I had a real good time." Now say anything you want. I know you know any dong, bong, and ding busted dang bladed fool ought to know that icicles breaking off branches can sound to drowsy ears like sleigh bells, that blurry eyes half asleep can see strange things, that deer make tracks like those of reindeer, that wind sighing and soughing and moaning through the piney treetops can sound like someone shaping words. But we could talk and talk and it would mean nothing to Stubby. Stubby is wiser than we are. He knows. He will always know who it was, plump and jolly and belly bouncing, that spoke to him that night out on the wind-whipped, winter-worn mountainside. "Well done, partner."